o'clock, and we will get the Georgetown-Scott County Planning Commission underway for the month of December. We will go down to this here. Need approval of the November invoices. Hope someone's looked over those.
I move we approve.
All right.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. The next item is the minutes for the November meeting.
Move to approve minutes from last month's meeting.
Second.
Both of us.
And Mr. Strickland. Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And look over the December agenda. Joe, do we have any changes to it?
No changes, although you talked about rearranging
Right.
a few items.
Do I need to do that now?
Yeah, you
Okay, we, in old business, we have ZMA 2023-55 Limestone Farms Distillery, and that is for a zone change. And then under new business, we have their preliminary development plan. And so we're just going to group those two together. We'll have to have a public hearing over the zone change, and then, but we'll talk about both of them there at the same time. All right, so that was the only change to the agenda. That's just an administrative change, no additions or deletions there. So do I hear approval or a motion for?
I'll make a motion to approve.
All right, Ms. Singer and Mr. Garrett. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. And there's no items for postponement or withdrawal then, Joe, is that correct? Okay. And consent agenda, do we have,
there's one item eligible.
okay,
Item B under old business, the Graves property.
okay. When we get down there, we'll see if anyone is opposed to that and go from there. If you were planning on speaking tonight, I hope you've already signed in the lectern up here, and Mr. Perkins will swear everyone in that was going to speak.
If every one of you would please stand, raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the statement you're to make tonight to be the truth to the best of your information and belief? Yes. Thank you all.
All right. So the first item is PDP 2023-50 Huck's Market. It's a preliminary development plan for 7,100 square foot convenience store gas station located east of McClellan Circle, south of East Main Street Extended, and north of Lemons Mill Road.
Yes, so this is preliminary development plan request for that first commercial lot on the corner of Lemons Mill and the bypass. This is one of 3 lots that were previously approved. The preliminary development plan came to the board 2 months ago, I believe. This is that first 2.47 acre lot. It's it gets its access from a new road that'll be constructed connecting East Main Extended to Lemons Mill. That road is not built yet. That will have to be built before we approve the final development plan, but this is the preliminary development plan just for that first lot. This is a mixed-use development that was rezoned in 2019. I guess it's the east side of the site is residential townhomes. The west side is B2 commercial lots. That's our highway commercial designation, so that allows most commercial uses. After it was approved, the board approved a development plan for the site. That ended up expiring based on our sunset clause, so we have 2 years. Preliminaries are good for 2 years with a 1-year extension. They went through 2 years, got that 1-year extension just because of kind of issues with the development. They didn't move forward. They were trying to get an entrance onto the bypass, and then they were working out kind of details of the development. So they came back earlier this year, and their new layout kind of amended where those commercial lot boundaries were. So they had to go through a rezoning, and they initiated that rezoning a couple months ago. It was approved by the Planning Commission. Now it's gone through first reading with City Council, and I don't think there's any issues with it. So that zoning is not finalized. So if you look on this plan where that red star is the lot we're looking at. That grade portion is still zoned R2. So that rezoning will have to be completed, with the second reading before the final development plan can be approved. So you can still approve the preliminary development plan contingent upon that zoning going through. So that's the lot we're talking about. So the general layout, there's a convenience store building in the center of the lot with entrances on the north and south of the building. The access will be from the new road that yet to be constructed as shown. So there's 2 entrances. First entrance goes to the main kind of automobile fueling area. There's 6 pumps under canopy there for 12 total parking spaces and fueling locations. There's parking around the building. There's a dumpster area to the right or to the east side with a small storage building. Because this is a triple frontage lot, so it actually has frontage on Lemons Mill, on the bypass, and on this new commercial road. Every road frontage is considered a front yard, so there's 50-foot setbacks on all those frontages. Actually, it's a quadruple frontage lot because there'll be a new road constructed on the north as well. So all those property lines now have a 50-foot front setback. So in order to do that storage building, they're going to have to get a variance, and I've included that in the staff report. So the variance would be to reduce that setback along that new road from 50 feet to 30 feet just to construct that storage building. They could probably fit the storage and an additional storage area if they kind of expanded the building, maybe on the west. There's a little bit of area, but it would get rid of some landscape island, maybe get rid of some parking spaces. Next to the dumpster seems like a logical location for a small storage area for additional storage. So we're in support of that variance. I don't think it detracts from the development in that location specifically. It seems to be a good location. So we are in support of that one variance. Other than that, some of the, I guess, details of the development, it's because of the slopes on the site to get the grade correct around the canopies and the fuel areas. They're going to have to put, kind of construct a retaining wall on that western and southern property line, so on the bottom and to the left on the drawing. And that'll vary from about 6 to 7 feet down to just a couple feet down by where the detention area is, but there will be a retaining wall on 2 sides of the parking lot. There will be landscaping above that, so to screen it, but you won't actually be able to see the grade from the adjoining streets because there'll be a retaining wall there. As far as parking, it meets all our parking requirements if you count the canopy area. So our typical for high volume convenience stores and fast food, our parking requirement is 1 space per 150 square feet of building area. I think that's 48 spaces on this site. They can meet that with the existing parking shown and the parking under the canopy. So it's been, although not specifically called out in our regs, we have counted on gas station convenience stores as the canopy, the fuel pumping areas as actual parking spaces in the calculation. So with that, they do meet our parking requirement. They can meet our landscaping requirement. our canopy, our perimeter, and our interior VUA, which is great because normally gas stations can't meet that interior and they need a variance, but they've been able to get that in there. I guess our only concern from a staff perspective is the orientation of that second fuel area. That's designed for trucks and trailers, larger vehicles, and it's designed so that you can go in the access easement. You can kind of see it better here. That hatched red area is the access that second access easement, the second entrance. In order to get to that canopy, you would pull in there, you do a kind of a U-turn, pull around that turnaround area and come into the canopy from the backside. I don't think there's any way to force people to do that, so they may, just if it's open, just pull straight in. I think with it oriented the way it is, if you have a long trailer, you may kind of block or cause a conflict there at the access easement. So we're requesting that they orient that so it's parallel to the building. I think they have enough room at low speeds. People can still make that turn, but that will help kind of avoid the conflicts in the access easement itself, and it will cut down on some of the headlights on the residential part, and you'll be able to buffer, I think, a little bit better in that landscape island to kind of cut down on some of the noise and the light on the adjoining residential area, which are townhomes that haven't been built yet, but there will be townhomes across the street, so that noise and that light will be mitigated, we think, can be a little bit by reorienting that canopy. Other than that, just some other aspects of this development. This is where the Legacy Trail extension is planned through this area. And they've shown an easement, a 30-foot trail easement along the bypass for that, and it would go to the intersection. And the Amerson development will eventually, has provided an easement for that trail as well. So it's when it's constructed, we think it makes more sense to build it, align it at the intersection there, because there won't be a light at the new entrance. So, and there won't be a stop condition for Lemons Mill, so it'll be tougher to get people across there safely. Other than that, we are recommending approval with the one variance to the setback, and then just with the condition in there, just to make it clear that this final plat and final development plan can't be approved until the infrastructure is in place, until that new road is constructed to the end of this lot, at least to the end of the lot, and there's water and sewer and all utilities on this lot itself. So they'll still have to go through that process, and then the zone change still needs to be approved, so contingent upon that as well. In my conditions of approval, number 1 just addresses that they need to construct all those off-site improvements, including the road improvements to Lemons Mill and the new road providing access, and then get all the utilities to the site before they can start construction on this convenience store and get final development plan approval. And condition 6 also addresses that the commercial lot we can't get a final plat until it has access, until all the utilities are there. So we are recommending approval with the 1 variance and the 11 conditions of approval.
Joe, I have a question for you. This particular lot, the wetlands is not on this one, is that right?
The pond is on, this is a generalized boundary of the lot. I just kind of traced it on there, but that pond will have to be drained for the new road. So it's not on the lot really, but it's on the right-of-way in the new road that's going to be constructed. And maybe a little of it is in the detention area. So they'll create a new detention pond, make the existing pond smaller. I don't know if they're going to completely drain it. They could probably speak to that, but it will go through the edge of that pond.
Does that require the state to get involved with the wetlands plan then or not?
I think they'll have to get Division of Water approval, or is it too small of a pond?
Not on that pond, as far as I'm aware.
Okay.
That is not the wetlands designated.
But the other end of this property it is?
The other end, yes, it's where everything, all the drainage ends up.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Joe? Joe, the only question I have for you is the secondary gas pumps in the back. You were talking about reorienting them. So the way it's oriented now, you said one reason for turning it is to cut down on the light in the residential areas across the street. Well, if you reorient it, it's gonna still do that, isn't it? Are there houses down there where it says storage building right now?
Yeah, the houses, further down, there are houses in Mansion Estates or.
That was the same thing across my mind.
But, yeah, there are houses further down. The new townhouses will all be constructed north of that new
New road.
access road, yeah.
Looks to me like the
And-
landscaping will cut it if it's turned. We'll cut the lights on it.
But if they slid it up and to the left closer to that stormwater management and then change the direction of the flow of traffic, where you pull in and pull into it, and your lights would be headed straight out the other way, and then they turn out and exit go out that way, that would fix that, where the lights, so then, you see what I'm saying? Change the flow of traffic, so you'd be parking into it.
Yeah. I would, not only just the headlights, I was thinking trailers backing up, backed up, or big,
Right.
long trucks backing up into the access.
You're not talking about semis, or are you?
There, I think, it will be open to semis. I think it'll be mostly, larger, vehicles towing
Farm
trailers.
trucks,
or,
pulling
yeah.
trailer type things?
Well, you've got all the industrial stuff, right across, a lot of semis and stuff right across the road, when everything comes through there.
Yeah.
They'll be, that southern states, they're close to school stop.
Okay. All right. Do we have the owner or the representative for the owner have anything?
My name is Darren Helms with Landmark Surveying, and I'm here representing Martin and Bailey. They're doing business as Huck's Market, and we're glad that you're hearing our proposed development plan, and thank the Plan Commission for working with us. They did a very good job helping us walk through this and getting a layout that I think that's acceptable. Regarding the canopy in the back, we worked hard on orientating that so that we could get vehicles in and out of there safely and in a way that we thought would serve the public good and plus work well for the client. So we actually we did have it parallel with the building, and we did reorient it this way so that we could narrow the entrance. We had a lot wider entrance along the new proposed street. When we orientated it parallel with the building, it made for a wider entrance to allow double access for the two lots. Like if you look at it, there's another lot to the north of it that will also be using that same entrance to access their lot in the future. And so we tried to orientate it such that the trucks could get in and out, the larger vehicles. These are for vehicles that, not necessarily semis. Semis possibly could use it, but really we're not targeting semis. We're targeting just vehicles that are larger than a pickup truck or a car that use diesel is the reason for it to be there. For delivery trucks, for RVs, for buses, things of that nature. So, but I do understand Joe's concern about the lights pointing at the proposed location of the townhouses in the future. So, we could put some plantings over on the other side of the street to help block some of the light also. Orienting the canopy, I would be willing to look at that. I mean, the client they want to approve, of course, So we would look at that. If that's something we could work through, we would definitely want to we would look at that, putting the canopy parallel with the building and going back the way we had it previously. But the reason we reorientate the way it is that for ease of movement for the trucks exiting and narrowing the entrance so that it didn't have to be in the 50-foot range. We got it down to the recommended 40-foot for an entrance. That's why that we orientated the way we have. So, any questions for me?
Any questions for Mr. Helms? All right.
All right, thank
sir.
you.
All right, any other questions or comments?
Ready for a motion?
I'm waiting for a motion,
Make a motion to accept it as presented.
I'll second that.
You give it to Jay. Is it Jay or is it
Yes. Dan?
Dan?
All right, Ms. Singer,
Yes.
Mr. Shirley,
Yes.
Mr. Jesse,
Yes.
Mr. Vest,
Yes.
Mr. Stone,
Yes.
Mr. Garrett,
Yes.
Mr. Green, Mr. Smith,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. If you will come down here and see Mr. Perkins, he'll get your paperwork squared away for you there. Thank you. Okay, the next item is the Graves property, and it is consent eligible. Is there anyone here that is opposed to the subdividing of that piece of property on Graves Road?
Which property?
For the Graves property
What's the address?
on,
Corner of Stonetown and Graves Road.
yeah. Stonetown and Graves Road. Okay. It is consent eligible. I will take
I'll make a
motion.
motion to approve FSP 2023-53, Graves property.
Second.
And David Vest. Okay, Ms. Singer? Mr. Shirley?
Yes.
Mr. Jesse?
Yes.
Mr. Vest?
Yes.
Mr. Stone?
Yes.
Mr. Garrett?
Yes.
Mr. Green? Mr. Smith?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. All right. Do we have someone representing the Graves family here?
Yes, right here.
Oh, she's already here. All right. Thank
She
you.
just got ahead of you.
She's ready.
She's quick. All right. Now, the next item is the Limestone Farms Distillery for the zone change. And then we've got another item for the same property. So we're going to jump the Fairfield Inn amendment up, and then we'll come back and get both of the Limestone Farms Distillery covered at one time. So this is PDP 2023-56, Fairfield Inn, a preliminary development plan for the redevelopment of an existing hotel through the addition of 5,107 square feet of building expansion and electric vehicle parking.
Thank you. So as Charlie had stated, this is an amendment to an existing development plan, a property addressed 200 Tiger Way. It is currently a 3-story hotel with 88 rooms. They also have parking, detention basin, landscaping, and they also have an outdoor pool. It's a 2.47 acre parcel, and the existing building is approximately 18,600 square feet, and they're looking to add 5,100 square feet in the form of 2 additional hotel rooms per floor and conference space, as well as they are asking to cover and update their pool area. I've included also their parking. So presently the site has 5 ADA parking spaces, 86 parking spaces total. And after development, they're requesting to have 91 parking spaces in total, 5 of which are ADA, 6 of which are for EV parking. And they are requesting 3 variances with this. So variances to front setbacks from Tiger Way, variance to number of parking spaces required on site, and a waiver to property and VUA perimeter landscaping along the east property line facing I-75. So this is an aerial of kind of the larger site here. I have a zoomed in one kind of referencing the property, but I included this just to kind of illustrate that this area is relatively developed with commercial activities. Most of the activities to the interior of Tiger Way are restaurants, and to the exterior of Tiger Way are hotels. And then there's car dealerships and other things on the south side. This is a zoomed in one here, so you can see the existing building footprint, the existing VUA area, pool area, and then their canopy. So the existing building is in purple, the existing canopy is in green, the existing pool area is in orange, and then the VUA is in blue. So this is their proposed amendment for the plan. I'll go through the pieces and parts that they've requested so far. To get started, they have 2 entrances off of Tiger Way, one kind of at the top of the curve and one south of the curve. And Tiger Way currently does not have sidewalks, or if it does, it's very inconsistent. While this property is kind of built right up to the edge of Tiger Way, staff would like to see marked pedestrian pathways that align with any existing pedestrian pathways just for safety for pedestrians getting through the property, and would request that and has included that as a condition. I've also highlighted the area where they are proposing EV parking. Per the applicant, they're able to find a way of providing EV parking that doesn't eliminate any parking spaces. They're going to be located in the existing kind of buffer area between the parking lot and the property to the south. Furthermore, they are requesting a variance to the number of parking spaces provided. When we're looking at hotels, our current regs require 1 space per room, 1 space per 3 employees, and 4 additional parking spaces per 50 guest rooms provided. Those are just to kind of accommodate for any guests, any secondary guests, that type of deal. Currently, the property has 86 parking spaces, and with the current regs considered, and with the addition of additional rooms, the current the proposed development would require 104 parking spaces. Kind of giving how much is going on the property, there isn't really a lot of spaces or areas where they could reorient the parking lot without having to completely overhaul their existing parking plan or eliminate parking for detention basins or anything like that. So they've requested a variance for it. They've stated that they are in verbal agreement with some adjoining property owners, specifically some of the restaurants, that in times and operation hours that do not exactly kind of collide with one another, they are going to direct people to use the restaurant parking spaces, which ultimately should address that issue, and if it comes down to it, we can obviously address it later. But ultimately, staff recommends approval of that request for a variance. Moving onwards, they have an existing stormwater detention basin on the property. I very briefly talk about it in the staff report, but the basin has been identified as needing maintenance and cleaning up, and then a stormwater management agreement provided and filed. So that is also an item that we'd condition. This is kind of the general improvements to the built structure. So I've kind of identified the existing layout on your guys' left side, and then on the right side, I provided what the new kind of footprint would look like. So they're relocating the existing canopy a little bit more north, and in doing so, kind of shortening it. They do need a variance to do something like that. The standard setback from the property line, which is about the center line of Tiger Way, is 50 feet, and the canopy would be 14 feet from the property line, so they're requesting a variance. The existing canopy is rather close to the property line, so in reality, while this is still kind of pinching into the property line, it isn't as much as the existing one, and staff believes the location provides greater visibility because it's kind of already tucked away a little bit more and it would be a little bit flatter. So staff ultimately supports that request for variance. They're also requesting kind of expanding, and you can see it kind of filling in this space where the pool is right now. They're gonna expand it and offer some conference areas as well as add their hotel rooms. And in doing so, they need a variance for that as well. So they're just kind of extending the facade of the building. And so I've included that specific measurement of 43 feet. So it would be closer, but it would be in line with the existing building. And so staff ultimately recommends approval of that variance as well. In this one, I've kind of identified areas of VUA, perimeter landscaping, property perimeter landscaping, and interior landscaped areas. They do have sufficient interior landscaped areas, but there are some trees that need to be installed in order to align with our ratio of VUA, or interior landscaped areas and interior landscaped trees. They are aware of it. They're going to be addressing those ones. And they have requested variances or a waiver to the property perimeter landscaping along the east property line, which is this kind of really long, narrow strip up here. There are a lot of utilities in that area. However, it's not, they do have some existing landscaping. I've taken some photos here. You can see their existing fencing and their existing kind of trees. Most of the area is already kind of landscaped, but it's landscaped mostly to the VUA perimeter landscaping requirements and not the property perimeter landscaping requirements. The difference is the VUA perimeter requires 3-foot tall buffers and the property perimeter requires 6-foot tall buffers. So because everything is already to the VUA perimeter size, requiring the property perimeter size would kind of create a very unlevel appearance to their landscaping as they're going by and would be a little bit excessive in this regard. However, the VUA property perimeter, which is much shorter and less trees per certain footage of linear boundary, staff ultimately recommends waiving that request for property perimeter, but still expecting them to install their VUA perimeter landscaping where they can fit it in accordance with our current regulations. They can cluster trees and cluster things kind of away from these really densely utilitied areas while still providing the sufficient amount of screening and everything like that. So lights from the vehicles in the parking lot are not kind of getting up into the on-ramps for I-75. So ultimately staff, to kind of summarize, ultimately staff recommends approving the waiver for property perimeter landscaping on that property line. However, would request and does not support a request for a waiver to the VUA perimeter landscaping along that east property line. Ultimately, after consideration, staff recommends approval of the preliminary development plan amendment with 3 waivers, kind of amending that 3rd waiver from what the applicants requested, which is property perimeter and VUA perimeter, to just property perimeter. And then specifically in condition 9, requiring that they install that VUA perimeter landscaping where possible along that east property line. Everything else is pretty standard conditions. Item 11 talks about that pedestrian walkway, at least marking it. Doesn't need to be a sidewalk, but just kind of a marked, safe path through the property so that people can safely get to and from their destinations. But besides that, I have nothing else.
I have a question, just mainly it's for the public, just and for the record.
Mm-hmm.
This looks like this is a big variance for the canopy change, and when you explain that to us, it makes sense going from the 50 feet to the 14 feet, the difference there.
Mm-hmm.
Could you like expand on that for the people that are in the room and weren't at that meeting?
Yeah, so the existing canopy is about 10 feet from the property line. So by requesting and kind of reviewing and approving it to be 14 feet from the property line would eliminate any conflicts with the overhang of that into the traveled ways of
To the street?
to the street, thank you, to Tiger Way. I was losing the word tiger on that one. I was really trying, but so by having it It allows for greater usability of the property and make it consistent with other hotels in the area that have covered areas for people to get out of their cars and grab their things, but also ensures a safer way for people to pass by the property to get to other destinations.
As we're looking at this map, the white building to the left of that is Chick-fil-A property.
Correct.
Is there a sidewalk that runs along the back of Chick-fil-A on that side of the street?
Joe, are you familiar with on that side?
There's a crossover.
Yeah, this is unfortunately.
What I was getting at is there a sidewalk on one side or the other on Tiger Way there?
It kind
No,
of alternates and stuff.
All right, thank you. Any other questions for Elise? All right, do we have a representative for the owner?
Joyce Followell, I'm with Abby Jones Consulting. We're providing the construction documents for this and the assistance for permitting. The sidewalk issue, there is a sidewalk plan for the entire front of the reconstruction. Currently, there is not a sidewalk that connects all the way through, but the proposed is that there's a sidewalk all the way across the front. Not at the road, but at the front of the building. The current requirement for the hotel is to have a sidewalk around the entire perimeter, and so there will be one along that. And we have looked at the possibility of putting a pedestrian cross from there to the Chick-fil-A, but we do have to figure out where is a safe place to direct pedestrian traffic. For the VUA perimeter along I-75, I was there just a few minutes ago, and there's bushes that are taller than me along the majority of that perimeter. These pictures don't show all those bushes, but in the left picture, the bushes you see there, they follow through the majority of the way. But there's not as many trees there. But along there are also manholes showing the AT&T communications, and then there's big warning signs. I would hesitate to dig a hole big enough for a tree to plant it there, because of the communication line that is obviously in that location. Bushes, maybe. Trees might be dangerous.
Didn't you say it was like the big southeastern United States type of thing?
Yes, from what I can gather, that communication line that runs along that property line between that fence and the side and the parking lot, which is not very far, less than 10 feet. The comm line that is buried there, from what I can gather, serves the entire southeast United States. So if we mess with that, I heard somebody did a few years ago and had a $500,000 fine. No, I don't want a $500,000 fine. Let's put in bushes. And I don't think we all want to be without the entire southeast United States communication for however long that would take. Anything else I can clarify for anyone?
On the parking portion of the staff report, it says 92 spaces. On the variance, it says 91. How many will there be?
So, the
Huh?
required.
91 or 92? Thanks, Charlie.
So,
Appreciate that clarification.
the 92 is the one per hotel room requirement, and then you have to add the number for staff, and then you have to add the number for the number of rooms
Yeah.
provided. So that would be our requirement. They're requesting that 91. If there's an error in the reference,
Yeah, I think
Then-
probably you just meant to put 91 there. because it
yes,
says
I
that there will be-
would say that is an error on my part.
So it's actually 91?
It would be 91, that is correct.
Those 6 spaces for EVs, can they be repurposed to regular cars if your lot's full?
I would.
With gas can a gas vehicle park there too? In the EV spaces?
Yes, a gas vehicle. It's just a parking space.
Right.
The only difference is at the front center
There's a charger.
between the two parking spaces will be a charger that's about 1 foot by 2 foot. It's
And
very
that's not a part
inconspicuous.
of the 91 spaces, right? So it's 91 plus 6?
No,
It's part of the 91, okay, all right. Okay, thank you.
So anybody could park there, but
There won't be
obviously.
any
it
restriction
got-
from the hotel saying if you don't have an EV, you can't park there.
Not that I know of it. I mean, they might go, dude, we got 3 EVs
Yeah, if they
that
have
need to be
empty spaces
charged.
otherwise.
But other than that, there's
Okay.
not a restriction that I know
Okay.
of.
Jamie, just for reference,
When are you getting one?
I traveled, was out of town one night a week for 35 years. And I think if I pulled in a motel and they said, well, we're full, we need you to go park at another lot, I wouldn't be back. I think if you don't have enough parking spots, and just like, have a convention or something in there. The Chamber of Commerce meets at another hotel once a month, and we've got 25 to 50 cars pulling in there. So, and granted, it's in the middle of the day when the motel normally isn't busy, but I think and that could be a problem, not having enough parking spots for rooms, and that's something that they would have to deal with. If they start losing business because of it, maybe that wasn't such a good idea after all.
I understand. I think part of their idea is to have the employees be the ones that are off-site parking,
Yeah,
not the actual customers.
Okay, well, that would make more sense. All right, thank you. Any other questions?
Steve?
Yes, sir. Mr. Price?
Excuse me, Steve, you didn't sign in. Do you swear or affirm what you're about to say to be the truth, the best information and belief?
Yes, sir.
Of course you do. Thank you.
I want to make sure I've gotten up here to speak at the right time. I want to thank the Georgetown News Graphic for running a front page story that this application has been filed, an application for a zone change has been filed. It says here, planning and zoning to hold hearing for proposed distillery.
No,
This is not-
we hadn't got there yet.
That's
This
why is that what you're discussing?
No,
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
But I saw these.
that'll be next.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. All right, any other questions about Fairfield Inn? All right. Do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion for approval of PDP 2023-56.
Second.
All right, I have a motion by Ms. Roby and a second by Mr. Shirley for approval. Mr. Shirley?
Yes.
Mr. Jesse?
Yes.
Ms. Singer?
Yes.
Mr. Vest?
Yes.
Mr. Stone?
Yes.
Mr. Garrett?
Yes.
Mr. Green? Mr. Smith?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes to approve. All right, the next item is Limestone Farms Distillery, and the zone change is what we're gonna hear first. And so we have to open a public hearing for that, and so the public hearing is now open for the zone change for ZMA 2023-55. The zone change request for 30 acres from A1 agricultural to B5 planned commercial development. This is located at 1530 Paynes Depot Road, basically at the intersection of Paynes Depot and McClellan Circle.
Okay, this is, as you said, a zone change request for a distillery and tasting room within the Georgetown Urban Service boundary south of the bypass and east of Paynes Depot Road. It's 30 acres of a larger, I believe, 206 6-acre farm that runs between the Ball Homes apartments and residential development across from Kroger, all the way over to Paynes Depot Road. And it's just a portion of that farm, kind of behind the lots that are on the corner there of the bypass of Paynes Depot. There's no floodplain or greenbelt within the 30-acre area. It stays kind of north of the floodplain of Cane Run Creek. This is kind of the boundary. It includes that barn and the residence and some of the trees on the northern boundary. Other than that, it's all pasture land. And this is the existing residence, I think, that's been there for a long time, along with the barn. The property boundary kind of cuts through that tree line north of that residence there. So this is the survey boundary. They will need that boundary and legal description for the zone change if it proceeds to city council. And this is the concept plan. So essentially, it's a 16,000 square foot distillery building on the north part of the site with an access road from Paynes Depot, from the existing entrance on Paynes Depot that comes down a frontage road and splits. The truck traffic goes to the left to the distillery, to a turnaround area and loading dock on the back of the distillery building. There's 4 grain silos and then 1 water tank or holding tank on the north side of the distillery building. South of that is a kind of open air, kind of outdoor venue for the tasting room. There's a fire pit, a walking trail, and then a viewing area and kind of a pavilion. And then most of the parking will be south in that large parking lot. There'll be an area for bus parking and then vehicle parking. So to summarize some of the project details, 16,000 square foot distillery building that will be 35 feet in height. I don't know the exact height of the grain silos, probably about the same height as the distillery, maybe a little bit taller. There's no long-term bourbon barrel storage, so no storage long-term, no rick houses on site. So everything produced at the distillery will be kept in barrels for the 90 days at the longest, just to coordinate shipping. And then some of it obviously will go to the tasting room. I don't think the production right away will. I'm not sure they can answer that, but there's no long-term storage on site planned. The tasting room, 6,400 square feet, but there's a lot of outdoor space along with that tasting room. And that tasting room, I imagine, will be a restaurant, bourbon tasting, open facilities for banquets and other events, most likely. The parking ratio for the tasting room, we used 1 space per 150 square feet, which is our maximum parking standard for any commercial use. The distillery, we use just the number of employees. Typically with an industrial type use, we require 1 space per every 2 employees and then 1 per truck. Access is from an existing entrance on Paynes Depot, so it's a limited access road. So where that curb cut, where that cut in the median is, and where the turn lanes are on Paynes Depot is kind of where that entrance is going to be. It'll come down a frontage road. That from the entrance to the site will have to be improved to our commercial industrial standard, which is either 24 feet in width, pavement width with curbs, with ditches and shoulders and ditches, or 26-foot curb and gutter, one of those, whichever is most appropriate. And as I said, there's no floodplain or greenbelt on this 30-acre lot. There may be a hair of existing.
Joe, just a second here. On the map right here, on both of these, it does show greenbelt.
Well,
it's the 820 line, isn't it?
It's the 820 contour. The existing, I was going to explain that a little bit.
Okay.
There's a little bit of the 820 going through that detention pond and to the left side of the site. Our current comprehensive plan is proposing to amend the greenbelt to make it a more logical boundary. It's going to be the floodplain of Cane Run Creek plus a 100-foot buffer plus 2 foot of elevation. So based on our current proposed greenbelt, none of that will be in this area. The existing 820 contour, a little bit of it, none of it's in the developable area, so it's all area that won't be developed, but there is, the existing adopted comprehensive plan 820 contour does, and the way that's always worked in the past, that 820 contour, when development occurs in an area where greenbelt is on the property, we allow an amendment of the greenbelt away from the 820 contour as long as it doesn't reduce the amount of greenbelt on the property. So we've allowed on other, it's kind of policy in our conference plan to allow, say if the 820 contour is 3 acres, to allow that to be amended with 3 acres in a more logical location, just because of the contours, the way Cane Run runs, and obviously it's running downhill. So as you get closer to Elkhorn, the elevations drop, and you get some fingers of greenbelt, which I'll show you in a minute, that go way up almost to the bypass. So that's kind of why we allow, as development occurs, to create a more logical boundary, as long as you don't reduce the amount of greenbelt on the property.
Thank you.
When we get a zone change, we look at KRS 100.213 findings required for a zone change. So first we look, is the request in conformance with the existing comprehensive plan, and that would be the future land use map and the goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan. And if not, is the existing district inappropriate, and would another district be more appropriate? Or have there been changes of physical, economic, or social nature in the area that weren't considered with the last comprehensive plan update, which would support a change in zoning? So those are kind of the 3 standards we use. Our existing future land use map, and we are in the process of updating our comprehensive plan. We have updated the goals and objectives. So the goals and objectives in the plan are the current 2023 goals. The text of the plan and some of the maps are in the process of being worked on, but we don't have a new future land use map adopted yet. So this is the future land use map from 2016. It shows all that orange is urban residential, and the red on the corner there is commercial. So there's a small area on this farm, or just off this farm itself, south of the bypass, planned commercial. It's about 8 acres. The remainder is urban residential or greenbelt. So that's the 820 contour right there. You can see how it goes up, follows kind of those drainage areas. So it is planned urban residential. So it is not in compliance with the future land use map itself, but the request is in compliance with many of the goals and objectives of the plan, including multiple goals in the community forum section of the plan and multiple goals in the economic growth section of the plan. And those are just to specifically point them out. And anytime you have goals and objectives, you are going to be able to pick out goals and objectives that support almost any type of request. So you kind of have to look at the big picture. And, are there some that outweigh others? Are the majority of the goals in support of something as opposed to the majority not in support of something? So as far as the community forum, the first one and the main one is to plan for an efficient use of services. And we do that through the urban service boundary. That's the main tool, in the urban areas. Define an urban service boundary, those are the areas you're saying you will support and allow and provide services for urban type development. And this is within the Georgetown urban service boundary, so we're saying this area in the short to medium term will be developed. You know, it's planned to be developed. It has access, you know, has road access, availability, has utilities that will be extended or can be extended to the property. And then annexation is always conditioned upon that. So if you have a piece of property within the urban service boundary, you want to develop it with an urban use, you need to extend required utilities, you know, pay for any upgrades, and then annex that. So it's conditioned upon annexation. So any urban development within the urban service boundary is conditioned upon annexation. And then CF2, maintain and enhance our built environments form and character by providing 2.4, provide an interconnected system of local and regional public and open space and recreational opportunities. And I put that in there because we do have a planned greenbelt trail system. We have gotten easements for a trail across the assisted living development on the southern bypass, on the backside of the Ball Homes development across from Kroger. So as this Jennings Farm develops, if we continue that trail, get a trail easement, at some point a trail connection will be, you know, allow for a trail construction along that southern greenbelt that could at some point connect all the way over to Great Crossing. So connect all that southern open space greenbelt boundary with the trail system. Economic growth chapter. So there are two goals and two objectives that identify a need to diversify the economy. So over 50% of the jobs in Georgetown are manufacturing related, mostly automotive manufacturing. So there are goals in there to diversify the economy, and this will diversify the economy, open up other opportunities in other industries, and in tourism, you know, increase tourism. And then EG to create more local opportunities for local business expansion. And this is a local entrepreneur, local business that will be expanding. So that's the comprehensive plan. It doesn't meet the existing future land use map, but does meet many of the goals and objectives in the existing comprehensive plan. And those are newly adopted goals and objectives. As far as the other two elements, we need to look at that just because it doesn't comply with our future land use map. Part A, is the existing zone inappropriate? I would say it is inappropriate because it's within the urban service boundary. It's planned for urban growth. It's got access to major urban arterial roads. It's got development all around it, increasing development. It does have access to utilities and city sewer and water. That will have to be extended to this lot. It's not on this lot, so it's at the boundary of the farm for the most part. So I would say this existing agricultural zone is inappropriate long-term based on its location within the urban service boundary, and the plan is to allow urban growth within the urban service boundary, not outside the urban service boundary. In Part B, have there been changes, physical, social, or economic in nature that weren't considered? Well, yes, there have been. So it's growing all around it. There's new development on all sides. That, I would say that was considered when we updated the comprehensive plan future land use map. But the new map is in process, so we don't have an updated map yet, so we can't say definitively whether it would change for this property because it's in process, but there have been changes general in the economy, in the bourbon industry, with the Bourbon Trail and the increase in tourism, that necessitate a look at kind of locations where these uses would be appropriate in Georgia County and Scott County in general. Based on the preponderance of evidence, I would say we are recommending approval of the zone change based on the goals and objectives in the comprehensive plan that would support it, based on the fact that the existing zoning is inappropriate, and there is support for this particular use in this particular location just because of the type of use it is. We don't necessarily want to see a distillery in the middle of a residential area. You know, there's heavier truck traffic to get material in and finished product out. A semi-rural location is better, but inside the urban service boundary is more appropriate if you can get sewer and utility to the property. So we are in support and we are recommending approval of the zone change for 30 acres from A1 to B5, which is planned commercial district, with 5 conditions. And I would point to condition number 5, which I put in there because there aren't utilities to the site yet. There isn't sewer on this 30-acre lot yet. There are some road improvements that will be required on the frontage road to get to the property. This may not be the best location for a large kind of commercial development with a big box store or similar kind of more urban, commercial that's not, a single-use distillery type use with a tourism component. So I just pointed out in number 5 that this zone change, if it goes through, they'll still have to submit a preliminary development plan, which we're reviewing next, but they'll have to do all the infrastructure improvements, and then they'll have to complete a final development plan, which is essentially construction plans for the development, and get that completed and construct the development. If that doesn't happen within the 3-year time period, which is the time period that preliminary approvals are good for, it will be an option for the Planning Commission or the City Council to initiate a zone change back to agricultural or back to some other zone. So, a use that wasn't contemplated in this area, like a large car dealership or, a large big box development, which may not be appropriate in this specific location, isn't necessarily being approved because the zone change occurs. So it can always be rezoned back in the future if this doesn't move forward. So I included that number 5 in there specifically for that purpose. So we are recommending approval with the 5 conditions.
Okay.
That's all I got.
Anybody have any questions for Joe? We'd like to, Steve, just a second, I'll get you here. I'd like to get the owners up here first and let them address anything that they wish to address, and then if they haven't covered it, I'll get you, Steve.
Well, good evening. I'm Daniel Rayner with Thoroughbred. I'll give Elise a minute. This won't be a long presentation. It'll be somewhat similar. But I got just a couple other items just to talk about. So I'm just representing the owner, Darren Dillow, for this project for the zone change amendment for the Limestone Farms Distillery. As Joe mentioned, that there's, we have 2 conditions we have to meet. One, we either have to, it must be in agreement with the comprehensive plan, or meet one or more of the following conditions, condition A or B, as was discussed. And I think we have evidence to support both of those. For the first one, just the existing zoning classification. given to the property is inappropriate or the proposed zoning classification is appropriate, just based on it being, it's not in the city limits, but it's in the urban service boundary. As Joe mentioned, it's an area that's been designated to first be developed before anything outside there. Also, just it being bounded by some major roadways with McClellan Drive and Paynes Depot, and it's just 3 miles from I-64 going further south in the other direction. It's a very highly traveled area from a lot of different directions. And then there is sanitary sewer available right next to the property. We've already had conversations and submitted a sanitary sewer availability request to GMWSS. It hasn't been approved by the board, but they've already come to an agreement of what they would approve. It just has to go to the board for final approval. This just again shows another map where the project site is, right over here on the corner there. And there's just been some other development around it. You can see, you know, all the subdivisions above it. That's one of the things I did want to point out as far as when you're talking about the comprehensive plan did designate this urban residential. One of the things I like about this development is it does actually really preserve the existing land better than an urban residential would, as you would have copy paste that down there, it'd be full, as much density as you get in there is what would happen, versus a project like this, which is actually going to kind of fit with the lay of the land and really preserve a lot of the existing character in that sense. And this just shows some other development out towards there, but there's been subdivisions and other development around the north as well as the west. And then condition B, just that there be physical, economical, social nature within the area that were not anticipated or adopted. As Joe mentioned, there have been some developments that were anticipated, but some of the ones that maybe weren't really have to do with some of the economic and social changes, just in the general sense within Kentucky and the Kentucky bourbon industry. Some of the facts, I guess you can't see them very well, that I added there, just about the bourbon industry. It's a $9 billion in economic output every year. It has created more than 22,000 jobs, which is like up 83% in the last 20 years. It's got quite a large payroll, just $1.2 billion, which is up 250% from the last 20 years. And then just the value of distillers' property and property around it has just gone up quite a bit, substantially within the last 12 years, just showing that it's something that is that kind of creates value around it. And just the growth and expansion of the Bourbon Trail that we've seen really in the last 10 years, it's been a big part, but it just really exploded. I wanted to point out this map too, for those of you that may not be familiar with it. There's been about 2.1 million visitors in 2022 throughout the Bourbon Trail. Quite a lot of people, and there's a big empty spot here where they're not coming for that specifically. So even if you tap into some small percentage of that and bring that through Georgetown, I mean, that would add quite a bit of just tourism and tax dollars throughout the other industries around it. So I think that would be a great addition to Georgetown. And this is just a color rendering of the plan. As he mentioned, it's a 16,000 square foot production distillery house. And then there's a 6,500 square foot tasting room there. That just, in talking with Darren, he doesn't expect it to be probably 25. Like most people aren't coming in the mornings. No one's coming in 8 o'clock in the morning. So any of the traffic that it generates really is in the afternoon. And again, it's not actually going to be a restaurant of any sort. It will just be a tasting room where they can come and experience some of the different production batches that they have, as well as maybe do a little tour of their production distillery, with just some nice outdoor areas just to kind of walk around as they experience it. So we are in agreement with all the conditions of approval that Joe recommended. He is fully going forward with this. This is something that it's not really an option to him to do something different. So we're in agreement with all the 5 conditions that Joe listed. That concludes my presentation, so if you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them.
I'll ask you or Darren, either one, last year, year before last, they ran sewer right through that property there to get to the trailer parks up there on Fayette County line there. So will you all have access to be able to tap into that line, or?
So there is a pump station near the southeastern part of the property, and they will have access. You will still have to run. We'll have to run it to tap into it, but they will be able to get there.
That doesn't run through this particular development, does it?
I do not believe so. No, not this part. Yeah.
It's farther to the east.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
How many acres is the whole farm? It's 30 acres with this, but.
It's about 250, was it?
250 acres.
206.
Okay, thank you much. Yes, sir.
So one of the things my name's Darren Dillow. I'm one of the owners of Limestone Farms. One of the things that's always a concern for distilleries in general is the mold that comes off of them. Okay, so the mold that comes off of them, or the angel share, is usually coming out of the rick houses. It's not coming out of the distillery itself. Production doesn't produce that. What produces that mold as the barrels age, it's the evaporation coming off of those, which is why you see the black mold sitting everywhere. We're not storing bourbon on this site. Okay, the longest we'll hold is about 90 days. And the reason being is we have to age that production and get it out of the way. I don't have enough room to store barrels. We're going to be making about 1,000 to 1,500 barrels a month. I'm not building that big of a distillery. Okay? So the storage is not there. We'll ship them off site. We'll store at places like White Dog, which is in Midway, Rabbit Hole. We may even ship some to Virginia. So when people are concerned about black mold, it won't happen here. The other thing is always the air quality from the Department of Environmental Protection. That's my background. So the stack height, what we will release is steam. And so what you'll smell, every now and then it'll smell like baking bread, is what it'll smell like, but we'll release steam into the atmosphere. So I just wanted to address if there's any concerns about mold from the community, things of that nature, that won't exist in the production facility. And I also wanted to ask if you guys had any questions for me.
The mold won't be there. What about and maybe you just mentioned it and I missed it there, the odor?
Yeah, the odor is, you're going to have an odor. Okay, there will be an odor. It will smell like baking bread from time to time. When the air gets real heavy and lays into those valleys, you always do. I grew up in eastern Kentucky in the southern Ohio Valley. If you've driven down through there, I can't help that. It'll come from anywhere. If you drive by Buffalo Trace at certain times, you'll smell it, right? So it will be there, but it's a sweet smell. What you won't have is a sour or a foul odor to that. That is also dictated by the stack height, meaning the steam stacks that we put up. The higher we put them, the less smell you get. And that is governed by the state of Kentucky, by the Department of Environmental Protection. I couldn't get around that if I tried, right? So depending on the zone that we have, that's what will set that boundary.
What will be your stack house?
I don't know. It's a good question. It all depends on the boiler sizes that we put in, the residents that are around, and what we'll do is an air quality survey to see how far that air travels. If it travels too far, then the stack height goes up another 5 feet, for instance. So we'll have to do that survey. That's one of the surveys we'll have to do. And that's under, I think it's called Title V permit, I believe. Don't quote me on that. Don't quote me on that. I can see him right now. That's why I'm looking. Don't quote.
Too late.
Yeah, any other questions for me?
Thanks much. Appreciate that.
Sure.
All right, anyone else in the, yes, ma'am?
Yes. Thank you. My name is Lacey Holland, and I represent Ben and Martha Smith. Their property is Edge Hill Farm, right across the street on Paynes Depot.
What'd you say the name was? I'm sorry.
Sorry, Edge Hill Farm.
No, the person. You said somebody
Oh,
Smith.
Ben and Martha Smith,
Okay.
sorry. I know I wasn't up here with the mic yet. So I just wanted to bring up a couple of points. We did not find out about this hearing and the proposed zone change until I didn't find out until late last week. My client didn't find out until late last week. Now, I know that there was a notice sent specifically to Martha's sister, who's a co-owner of this property, late November. So, we're looking at just a couple of weeks ago. Now, I know that there are all kinds of statutory notice requirements here. But from our perspective, a development of this size that has this much of a community impact, we really believe that prudent development would say you've got to have a little bit more community input here. We're talking about environmental impacts. There are going to be smells. I certainly appreciate all of the information we've received about the black fungus that can be a real issue in communities where there are rick houses. And we just really wanted to emphasize today first that we were surprised to kind of find out that a development of this size, that this process had been kind of going on, and we didn't feel like we were really included. And I don't know the extent to which some of the residential communities, if they're close enough to receive the same notice, but I really feel as though this is something that even our residential neighbors would appreciate knowing a little more about. But in looking over the staff report and hearing the presentation today, we do have a few concerns. And first, I'll address those statutory requirements of KRS 100-213. So as noted, the finding that the Planning Commission needs to look at, it has to be a preponderance of the evidence, and I think that's really important here. We know that it does not fit within the comprehensive plan. The Planning Commission acknowledges that, or the staff report acknowledges that, excuse me. But when we're looking at sections A and B, I think we have some serious questions that are raised. When I think about whether the agricultural zone is inappropriate, which is the word that was used in the staff report, my concern is that just because a piece of property is currently situated within the urban service boundary, does that mean that that agricultural zone is inappropriate? Does that fit within the comprehensive plan and goals and objectives of, preserving some agricultural qualities in Georgetown and Scott County? So another note that was made in the staff report was that another appropriate zone would be urban residential, which was included in the comprehensive plan, the planning map, or a zone which would support a single planned campus type use. And I'm not positive kind of where that came from, and I just wanted to point that out for the record. So then we get into the economic change. And I think that there has been a little bit of, we have to really look at what that requirement is. The requirement is that there have been major changes of an economic, physical, or social nature within the area involved, which were not anticipated in the adopted comprehensive plan. We know that a lot of these changes, as has been discussed today, were within that comprehensive plan consideration, and which have substantially altered the basic character of such area. So after we have concluded that the comprehensive plan did anticipate changes to this area of some kind of urban growth, everything kind of turns toward what I'll call bourbonism. And I love bourbon as much as any, Kentucky girl, I'd say. But I think that when we're really focusing the analysis on some state and even nationwide love of bourbon and growth of the bourbon industry, that kind of misses the mark on that last requirement. What we need to be looking at is not, some economic development broad argument. We are supposed to be looking really at whether or not these changes were anticipated within the comprehensive plan. So that brings me to some of the more substantive questions, and I have quite a few of them. I know it's going to be really difficult for owner representatives and probably the staff to answer tonight, and I think that's part of the reason I think we need to maybe have further conversations about this project. I'll start with those economic questions. Bourbon takes time, as we all know. I don't know how long Limestone Farms bourbon typically takes from the time that it goes in the barrel to the time it goes into a bottle and is put on a shelf. But it's going to take some amount of time to be called bourbon, which, some statute that I don't have off the top of my head. But, we want to know about, they're going to be selling some clear spirits in the meantime. A lot of distilleries do that. And I know that Limestone Farms already has some kind of production. So, that's kind of a question just from an economic standpoint. So next, I'd like to talk about annexation. Now, it's my understanding, under, I think it's KRS 81A, Chapter 81A, that you can only annex property that is contiguous to the current city limits. And it's my understanding that this property may be at least adjacent, but is not contiguous. And I think we need to really think about the process of annexation and whether we need to address that issue first, whether more of this farm needs to be annexed to meet that city boundary, because annexation is going to be a requirement for this project to move forward, as the staff report has mentioned. In looking at the future land use map, I also have some concerns about the idea that we will essentially be adding more commercial property than anticipated by the Planning Commission and the comprehensive plan. The future land use map very clearly designates a lot of commercial use property within Georgetown to meet all of those objectives, goals and objectives that the Planning Commission set out. This property, there's a small commercial property right near it. So this has been very carefully thought out. And my question really is why we can't have a distillery in a place that's already planned for some kind of commercial development. When we're looking at environmental factors, one of the questions that kind of came to me in just looking at the general map and area is the impact that this will have on Cave Run Creek. You know, we've got waterways close by. Just want to make sure, I mean, you have all kinds of different runoff and issues, not only in a final distillery project, but in the construction of it in the first place. And want to make sure that, you know, we're doing our best to protect any local waterways. We've already talked a little bit about emissions and storage of barrels. But when we're talking about 90 days, are there any, I don't know, but are there any issues with any kind of fungus growth within that first 90 days? Or are we looking at any kind of problems there? And also, what would stop this development or this distillery from expanding in the future, building warehouses, building rickhouses? You know, we need to kind of consider future growth of this distillery as well, potential future growth. And, you know, looking at the comprehensive plan and goals, there are a lot of kind of green initiatives, and I want to make sure that, you know, any development that is in this area does in fact meet some of those green initiatives that are set forth in the comprehensive plan. And I won't go through all of them here. Next, I think that we really need to consider more closely the impact of traffic, impact on traffic. You know, we do have these two major roadways. As we can see from the map, there's kind of an offshoot of Payne's Depot that, you know, would lead to kind of the start of this distillery. But, you know, we're not talking about just 25 people, you know, visiting every couple of hours or so. We're talking about a lot of commercial movement in and out of the distillery to bring in grain, to take out whatever needs to be brought out, including a lot, as we have heard, barrels. And that takes a lot of movement of commercial materials. And we've heard that there may have to be changes to roadways. And that is critical here to understand the impact that that's going to have on roadways right here in what is right now still really an agricultural rural kind of area. So a couple of final points here. One thing that has not been brought up at all is the noise impact that this could have in this area. You know, my client owns a farm that is very rural, very agricultural property, and you know, noise can travel in very strange ways, as we all probably know, on farms. So when we're talking about events that are going to be happening, what kind of, are there going to be larger scale events, number of people, what kind, will there be noise from the distilling itself, and what about lights? You know, and I know that a lot of this stuff is things that come up in the development plan stage, I understand that, but they are certainly concerns of local residents at this point in even seeing a potential for a zone change, not just for a distillery project, but for changing the zone to a B5, very broad commercial park type zone. And then we talked a little bit about water and sewer, and as we all know, GMWSS has basin capacity issues. You know, that has been a substantial issue in this community for a while now. The idea that they will be able to tap in doesn't mean that GMWSS will allow them to tap in and grant that access. And I think that could be, you know, that's just something that needs to be considered, because obviously a distillery is going to likely have a lot of wastewater and water impact in this community, especially if annexed into, would have to be annexed in the city. So kind of in summary, I just want to point out that we really believe that there should have been more community input here. We believe that that road has not ended, that can certainly continue. This is a very large scale project with many important impacts. This is not a Huck's or Fairfield Inn that's kind of going into an already commercial area. We're talking about a project within the urban service boundary, as a lot of considerations going along with it. B5 use was not contemplated for this property according to the comprehensive plan, and there are many, many commercial options available within Georgetown. All I'm asking tonight is that we proceed cautiously, we proceed with all of the information that we can possibly get our hands on, and if that is in the form of, you know, working with the owner and developer to have a public or community type meeting, or having another public hearing where we make sure that everyone is aware of this project going on. And that's, those are my client's requests. So, thank
Can I
you.
ask you a question, please?
Yes.
Can you point out to us on that map, what's the name of the farm again?
Yes, it is this area right over here, so right across.
Across the road?
Yes.
And what's the name of it again?
Edgehill Farm,
Thank you.
yes. Any other questions for me? I know that was a lot to throw out at you all.
The name of your property is?
Edgehill Farm, Edgehill,
Edge Hill.
Eggshell?
Edgehill.
Edgeville.
Hill.
How do you spell it?
Hill.
Kill, Edgehill.
How do you spell it?
Kill?
Hill.
Hill, Edgehill.
H-I-L.
Edgehill, Edgehill, right. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Edgehill, thank you.
We'll have that in the record for sure. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
Isn't that
you.
the farm where Deacon and Eloise used to live? Okay.
On the
I thought so.
notifications,
Okay.
Joe, I know it's an old business. Was there notification sent out prior when it hit the agenda, but then was not presented? So I'm assuming 2 notifications went out.
Yeah, there was one notification sent out. We opened the public hearing and then continued it.
Right.
There was a sign posted, but one notification, one sign.
Okay.
But there also would have been a notification for the preliminary development plan as well, right? No? Yes?
Yeah.
Yeah, so really, in essence,
Two
for the
notifications.
projects, okay. And then, in regards to the adjoining farm, I guess it's obviously within the radius, even though it's across a major roadway. I think they made comment of somebody, some co-owner had received some notification.
Yeah. Yeah, the farm across the street was notified. It was, because of the notification area, it didn't reach the residential lots inside the bypass because of 1,000-foot radius.
It is 1,000 feet radius, just so everybody.
And I know there was an article in the paper that Steve referenced, Mr. Price referenced earlier. Have you had any of the residents call with questions or concerns or anything since that article came out?
Yeah, we've had a few, and I did get a letter that I was going to enter into the record from one property owner. I can't read the writing. Barry Connor, Martha Smith, Candace Greathouse, Francis
replace Slum.
Sam Connor? Is that?
Is that the same farm?
Yes,
So
same one.
and I'll clarify too, go back up here, so my client Martha, her sister received notice, and I understand the PVA record has, her address, I believe outside of Louisville as the address. So she did receive it on November 29th, but part of the grievance is just, we're right in the middle of Thanksgiving holidays and we get this notice. And so that is the first time. And the notice only spoke that she received, that her sister received, only spoke of the preliminary development plan, not the actual zone change. And did a little bit of digging around and found out kind of the full scale of what was going on, but really kind of had to engage us to get to that point. So that, that's kind of where we were on that, is that because of the kind of the scale and what we're looking at here, we just felt like it would have been more prudent to have a little bit more notice. And we technically don't know if we did receive adequate notice, just as a legal basis, but yeah.
So the preliminary development plan letter that you got was the second letter that came out?
No.
Yes.
It's the second one that came out, maybe.
Right, maybe,
Yeah.
I don't know if she received
Yeah,
it.
then there was a zone change letter that came out.
Right, there did not
You may not have
receive.
received it, but it came out. There were 2 letters.
Okay, yes,
Yeah.
and that's, yeah, and I think that is part of the problem, is just when things were received and,
Yeah.
so.
The statutory requirement is based off when it is sent, correct? In terms of the requirement of notice, it's based off of when something is sent, correct? Relative to the hearing date, right?
Not necessarily.
It has to be sent a certain number of days prior to the hearing.
Right.
Right.
So when was the zone change one sent? Do you know? Do you have from your record?
Yeah, it was sent October 25th.
Okay. And the PDP one was sent?
No problem.
It's on our corrections deadline, which is 2 weeks, 15 days prior, so.
That's what the requirement is for both
Yeah.
zone change and PDP?
Was the same list that people used.
Yeah.
It's the same.
Right.
Sure, excellent.
Can we see that letter that you referenced that was mailed to the planning commission? Can we look at that?
You want to look at the letter?
The actual, not your letter, the letter that someone was sent.
You can pass it around. November 29th.
Okay. Was when the PDP one went out?
Yeah.
Lindsay, do you have anything else that you need to say
I
at this
don't,
time?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
If you do have
All
any
right.
more questions.
We've got somebody else that wants to speak, so we'll. Steve?
Thank you, Charlie Mifflin, and as I said, thank you to the news graphic for.
Can I hold this so it doesn't fall?
What's that?
Can I hold it for you so it doesn't fall and break? Or I can set it down on the.
Well, I'll tell you what, let me lay it down like this, how's that? Is that all right?
I just don't want it to break.
Yeah, good, all right, thank you. Yeah, I want to thank you for allowing me to address you regarding an issue that affects me in my hometown, in my home county. If this happens, if you approve this, it's going to happen within a mile or 2 of where I live and where I raise crops. And I'm in a minority, increasingly in a minority of people in Scott County who bother to raise crops. And I brought this tonight. Actually, I was on my way to deliver this to someone else as a Christmas gift. But I'll deliver it after this meeting. But fortunately, I have it with me to indicate to you that any fool, including me, can get out on a piece of land with a wheelbarrow and a grubbing hoe and a shovel and a string line and produce food crops. And I ask you, if I open this up and pass it around, which would you rather it be? Would you rather it be pickles or would you rather it be whiskey? If you approve this application, your answer is you'd rather it to be whiskey. And I ask you, do you want your children? Do you want your nephews, your nieces, anybody you know to believe that whiskey is better than homegrown produce from the garden that anybody who's willing to get up and move can create and from that garden produce a whole lot, if not all, of the food that person and his or her family consume. And that's the issue here. Scott County has become a cash flow mecca. And I can remember when I was a kid, people resisted that cash flow trend by raising crops, by raising gardens at home. And I grew up at 618 South Broadway, and every home within sight of where we lived had some kind of horticulture. The next door neighbor, Fred Lisby, a lawyer, had grapevines and a peach tree. Behind him, Archie Fry, the founder of the Georgetown News Graphic, had the greatest orchard and vineyard I have ever seen anywhere, and I've been working in horticulture my whole life. Archie Fry did that in his own time while his spare time, while he ran the News Graphic. All the way up South Hamilton Street to the house to the cemetery. Every home, Robinson's, Chester Alexander, the chemistry professor at the college, everybody had strawberries. The Robinsons had a garden. Everybody raised crops.
Steve?
Come down South Broadway, Polly Cook had chickens. When you get to the Prathers, where Porter Prather lives now and lived then, and where Harold Prather lives now, or Harold Prather did live until he passed away, and where John, his son, lives now, no crops. Because they were serving the interests of General Motors.
Steve, hold on a second.
Yeah.
I want you to address what, I'm assuming that you are opposed to this distillery. And I want you to tell me why you're opposed to that. We all know that you are a strong proponent of individual gardens.
You got it.
Okay, but what is your stand? Why are you opposed to this distillery project tonight?
First of all, we're talking. I've heard the term. I've heard the figure 30 acres. It's 30 acres that is allocated for something other than horticulture.
Steve, those owners may not want to grow crops. Just because they have the land doesn't mean that they have to grow crops.
Of course not. But they have to do anything else. They have to get a permit from you. And I'm asking you to use your moral. I talked to this man, Dan Smith, before the meeting. He said, we can't, as long as they're legal, there's nothing we can do to stop it. Am I correct? Is that what you said, Mr. Smith?
Yes. Something to that sort, yes, sir.
What's that?
Something to that sort, yes,
Yeah,
sir.
right.
If it's an approved.
Well, but if they're, simply because the law says that they can, let's say the law says that they can make whiskey, and they comply with the law, and they come in here and say, give us the permit. And I'm saying to you, you have the option to say, no, we don't want any more whiskey in Scott County. And you have that option. You have that personal option as a citizen of Scott County, as well as
Commissioner.
as an appointee to the planning commission,
Yeah.
to say no. And then you say, why, and do I object? First of all, the land would be, if you say no to this permit, then you saying to the owner of the land, we're not gonna approve anything but agriculture. And that induces the present owner. By the way, is Mr. Dillo, are you Mr. Dillo? He's the owner, or you want to lease it?
We're gonna lease it.
You want to lease it, right? And you're saying to Mr. Dillo and to the owner, we're not gonna support, we're not gonna underwrite, we're not gonna rubber stamp whiskey production. Period. You have that's the choice option I would exercise if I sat in your chair. And okay, well, you say, okay, that's number one. You want to preserve the land. It's currently zoned for agriculture. By the way, does anybody here have a copy of the planning and zoning ordinance? Is there a copy in the house anywhere? Y'all have a copy of it?
Ordinance
Huh?
or the
The planning and zoning ordinance, Scott County planning and zoning ordinance.
zoning ordinance.
In our
We have it on
office.
phones.
Huh, it's on your phone? Would you please look up 2.81A, parenthesis 6.
Okay, Steve, we need to keep going here.
Okay, she's looking, okay, I'll tell you what it says, and she can verify when she finds it. This lady from Edge Hill Farm just said that because this land is located in the urban service boundary, A1 zoning is not illegal, simply because it's in the urban service boundary. And isn't that what you said, man?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm gonna underscore what she said and emphasize what she said. If you look at 2.81A6 of the Scott County zoning ordinance, it says horticulture is allowed in all zoning districts. That is a law that was passed in Scott County by Scott Countyans, elected to the, I don't know who drafted it, but it was approved by the fiscal court and by the Georgetown Council. So they approved, that law has been drafted and approved by both legislative bodies of Scott County. I'm going to repeat it, 2.81A6. If anybody's got a phone, you can look it up yourself. Did you
Okay,
find it,
but
man?
it doesn't say, Steve.
What's that?
It doesn't say that you have to.
No, but it
engage.
says you can.
It can, okay.
And that's what she said a while ago. The fact that
And
it's-
we're not denying that.
What's
I
that?
think she
We're-
didn't
we're
use the
not
term
denying
illegal.
that.
She said inappropriate.
Right, okay, so the owner of this land has currently the option to practice agriculture because it's zoned A1, and also, as I'm trying to make a point now, because your zoning ordinance, which you supposedly enforce, or if I have to use that word, or support, or try to make real, says, item 2.81A6, horticulture is allowed in all zoning districts.
I don't think she used the term illegal. I think what she was referencing was
What's
Joe's
that?
word of inappropriate based off of the future land use.
What's that, ma'am?
I don't think that she used the word illegal. I think she was quoting Joe talking about the use of the word inappropriate. I don't think anybody's saying that it would be illegal for agriculture, horticulture to
Good.
take place there.
Good,
Nobody's
good,
saying it's illegal.
Good. So
Yeah,
so
nobody
you
says
agree,
that.
we all agree that the owner has a right under current, at the moment, the way the law, the way the permits and everything exists now, has the option, perfectly legal from now on, to continue practicing agriculture and horticulture on the land that is the subject of this permit.
That's
If
correct.
they choose.
And they have a right not to.
If he chooses to.
If they choose.
And he has a right to do other things with it also.
Of course, but
Okay.
if he
All right.
has, if if whoever owns land has the impression, whether, I'm just trying to make sure that the owner knows that he's under no obligation whatever to practice, to cease horticulture and agriculture anytime in the future under the current laws. So that to make sure that he's not feeling pressured, or she, I don't know who owns the land, but whoever that person is, that person is well aware that he or she has the option to practice horticulture and agriculture under current law.
Steve, that farm has been, that land has been farmed by families for many generations. I'm sure they are quite aware of, and they still raise cattle there, raise hay. If you drive down the bypass, you see that all year long.
Good
and they
for them.
have chosen to do something else with 30 acres of this land.
Which they have the right to.
And
Which
I'm
they
saying-
have the right to do.
What's that?
Which they have the right to do.
They have the right if you give them the right. They come to you to ask you to give them the right to do that. And I'm saying if I say it today, I would not grant the right. It's a question simply, do you want food or do you want whiskey on the streets of Georgetown?
That's like saying, do you want Toyotas out here or
I'll answer
something
that
else?
question. As a matter of fact, that's part of, I'm gonna.
No, we're not gonna answer that. I was using that as an example that everything doesn't revolve around a farm
Steve,
any longer.
Something you have to think about is, okay, farming's tough right now. Financially, farming is very tough, okay? If they can take 12% of their land and make some cash so they can keep the farming part of it going, that's good for farming, that's good for agriculture.
I do have a question too, so.
Yeah, I understand that, but what I was gonna.
Steve?
Anybody.
Steve?
Yeah.
We got,
So you're gonna make whiskey there. What are you gonna use to make that whiskey?
What's that?
Can I come up?
Yeah, tell us what you're gonna use to make the,
And I'm glad you asked.
Yeah.
So, there's a couple things to make whiskey, as we all know. All right, so, thank you for that.
Yeah.
So one of the things for agriculture in Scott County that we have to purchase is crops, right? So we use corn, we use mash, we use barley, we use wheat. That corn, we already have contracts with a few folks here in Scott County, that's where it'll come from. So to answer part of that question and part of the concern, a lot of that return of revenue for Scott County will stay in this county. And some of your bigger farms that we all are very aware of will supply some of that. I'm not gonna throw the names out there, I'm not ready to yet, but that's where a lot of that corn will come from.
and then there'll be a byproduct of that.
Will
What
be.
will you do with that?
So the mash is dried out, it's stillage off the farm, it has to be 97% dry in order to be pelletized. And we all know once that's pelletized, that'll be cattle feed. I can tell you that cattle that's on that property belongs to myself and my father-in-law that's on that property. I promise we will have the fattest cows in Scott County. Okay? The other thing to that, you also have Conley's Farm, you have Southern States, you have a lot of folks that'll be able to benefit from the feed coming off of that distillery. So that's part of that revenue base.
So it'll be a benefit to the farmers
It
and
will.
the community.
And encourage ag use of other property as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. So if I can just answer a couple of concerns, because we don't want to be adversarial, so I want to answer a couple of your concerns as well while I have the floor, because I'm going to keep it for just a second. Okay, so the spirits that we have now, the question was asked, she doesn't know if we'll make clear spirits. We have the capacity to do so, okay, so we can make vodka on the farm as well as bourbon. Okay, our stills are brand new. They are 2,500 gallon stills, which are fairly large in the production facility. All right, but will we have our own? No, it takes 2.5 years to age bourbon. In order to be in the state of Kentucky, it takes 2.5 years. However, do we already have bourbon into the market? Yes, we do. We already have bourbon in 12 states in our country that's being sold currently under the Limestone Farms brand. All right, so the revenue for tax, if you go back and look at our taxes, we're already paying revenue and tax in Scott County. So that's already built base. So what we're doing is we're bringing that bourbon in. We're already up in sourcing that and moving that out into the market. Okay? If you go to Kentucky Eagle, if you go to Liquor Barn, you'll find our bourbon. All right, it's already on the shelves. So to answer your question, we're already running that. Okay? So I want to be very clear. The environmental concerns that was brought up is a valid concern. I can't help the construction concerns, so I'll put that on construction. Silt fencings, things like that, and Daniel, I'll let you answer some of that if you want to. However, from an environmental standpoint, from a distillery, most of that's all natural. Okay? I can't help some of the byproducts, but we do use it back in the agriculture. So we do watch that. That is my background. I do have a degree in environmental protection, okay? So that is part of my responsibility in order to do that. The evaporation on the angel share, will there be some? Evaporation doesn't occur until about a year. Okay? So that's when that angel share begins to change. It takes about a full year before you'll lose about 5% out of that barrel. Our barrels will be long gone before that ever occurs in that evaporation stage. Okay? The traffic concerns, there will be traffic coming down into there. There'll be trailers, there'll be 18-wheelers, there'll be buses. There will be things like that. Are we looking to have 100 people, 1,000 people a day? I would love to say yes, because I would love the revenue from that. However, that's probably not going to happen. Okay? We'll have about 1 to 2 trucks in there a day. Same way a farm would take trucks up and down the roadways. Okay? So you're not going to change 62. Noise impacts, there will be some noise. There will be some internal noise from the production facility, mostly steam boilers. So we're running steam boilers, we'll have some gas-infused pipes. You won't hear hardly anything from the inside of the distillery. I think the concern's more the venues, what we'll have outside. There will be some small venues that's outside. We're not looking to have 10,000 people at a concert. And that's not what we're looking to do. This is a small family distillery. It is local owned, unlike some of the other ones around. We're not going that big. And so we're trying to keep this very local to us. And for people to come and be able to have a bourbon outside if they want. They can smoke a cigar on the back porch or whatever the case may be, but it's a small family-owned distillery. There are 4 owners to this distillery. It is myself, it is a gentleman by the name of Bobby Sturgeon, a gentleman by the name of Greg Couch, and then Tim Couch, who most people will recognize. He's obviously the face of the brand. He's much better looking than I am. So he's the one that sells the bourbon.
Can I put that in the minutes?
Yeah, go ahead,
All right.
Charlie. And you can quote that, don't quote that part. I told you that twice now. Don't quote that one. All right, light impacts. The distillery will have lights, but what we're doing is we're building a farmhouse style distillery. So it'll look like the surrounding areas. It's not going to be a big brick school building looking distillery. This will be more of a farmhouse style. The visitor center will have a wraparound porch that goes all the way around it. It'll have low lighting around that facility, so it looks like a country style home is what it will look like. So the entire facility will follow that mantra. And then, of course, the impact for the revenue for the farmers as well. So those are some of the impacts that I just wanted to get addressed. We definitely don't want to be adversarial with you folks. I'll answer any questions that you may have at all, or anybody else for that matter. But hopefully,
Just to address Mr. Price's agricultural concern again, I mean, I think at its core, bourbon is considered an agricultural product. And even under the Kentucky Proud program, right?
Correct.
So,
and we will be on the Bourbon Trail. It will be considered Kentucky Proud, so it is an agricultural product.
I thought so. I just wanted to confirm.
It is. Thank you.
And actually, we've had bourbon in Scott County since the late 1700s.
Elijah Craig would agree with you wholeheartedly.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, I have a question.
In my house since
You're talking about the lighting and all that for her. How would you compare that to the subdivision that's adjacent down the road, say, kind of help ease their mind there?
Yeah, and I think that's fair, David. I think compared to that subdivision, we'll be much dimmer than that subdivision will ever be. We don't have big floods. We don't have those type of lights. What you'll see is a more city-style lantern-style lights around the area. We want when you drive in to feel at home. We don't want it to be a awful production facility. Okay, so we want you to feel at home there. It'll be low dim lights, but it'll be comparable to a subdivision, if you will.
Is it a multi-shift operation? Or
It is. It is a multi-shift.
What are the shift hours planned?
It'd be 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Okay, and the reason I say
3 shifts, 3 production shifts?
Not 3 production shifts. It'll be 2 production shifts, 6 days a week. What we will do is we'll run morning and then we'll run an evening shift. We will shut down, have maintenance come in. That's our maintenance time during the night times. Be ready back up in the morning in our fermenters and start again.
What's your planned shift hours? Do you have those identified yet?
I wish I could answer that. I'm going to give you a rough guess, probably 6 a.m. to 9 p.m., give or take a few.
How many employees are you estimating?
We'll range from 35 to 50.
On each shift or
No,
total?
No, just total. Our most important will be our maintenance staff. Once the distillery's up and running, it's fairly self-absorbed.
And just about 2 semi-loads of grain today.
Yeah, right at it. Our silos will be big enough to hold what we need for a while. We're also going to use some of the dryer systems to dry out the waste and so forth, so it'll be different.
And I guess my next question would be, kind of pertains to her also, and I'm sorry I forgot your. Why did you choose that spot there?
Oh, that's fair, David, you know that. All right.
I know that, but yeah.
You might as well say it. My father-in-law is sitting over here. That's Dudley Jennings. He owns the property. Obviously, I have an inside track because it's family property. Okay? I will tell you, though, the reason we chose that is because Summerwind Farm sits right next door. Old Friends Farm sits right down the road, and we're close to an interstate. There's no better tourism package for the city of Georgetown than that. Okay? So our goal is to bring we want people from Georgetown to come in and enjoy, and we'll have our regulars, I'm sure, but we want people coming off that interstate is what we want. Any other questions?
Sorry, I couldn't hear what you said. You said you want people to come in and enjoy it, and then you said what?
We want people to come in from Georgetown to enjoy, but we also want people to come in off the interstate to enjoy as well. So we want people to come and share in that revenue.
Darren, thank you so much for addressing these
No problem.
issues that have been brought
Sure.
forward. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
And I was just going to mention a couple of the other issues that Lexi or Lindsay? Lexi mentioned. With the annexation, it was discussed a little bit in the workshop meeting, but it would have to be a larger piece of the property that will be annexed. It won't be just the 30 acres because of that condition. So there will be a larger piece of the property that has to be annexed to meet that condition. As well as traffic, one of the requirements is if it generates more than 100 peak hour trips, you'd have to do a traffic study. This facility with the combination of the tasting room and the production facility does not even meet 100 peak hour trips, so it was not required to do that. So it won't have a significant impact of increased traffic compared to what's already there. And then as far as for the stormwater and construction, as far as any stormwater leaving from the site has to go through Ben Krebs for one. Has to be approved by Ben Krebs to be allowable. There's standards for that, as far as that's what it's not showing up there. But there'll be a detention basin that'll handle that. During construction, there's erosion control that's required, and then anything associated with production can't go to the stormwater. It has to go through sanitary, and he'll have a process to clean that before it even goes to GMWSS for that. And I think that addressed the other three that Darren did not discuss. So, yeah.
Well, Charlie, I want to call for the zone change for approval. Can we do
Okay.
that now?
Yes, sir.
Approval for ZMA 2023-55.
Excuse me, could you have as part of that based upon the staff report, because it had factual findings, conditions, and all that in there?
Okay, just what, do we say all that?
Well, no, just say the motion is based upon
Motion is based
the
on
staff
the
report.
staff report.
Excuse me, Charlie, I've got more to say if I'm
No,
allowed.
you,
Well, hold on a second. We have a motion on the floor here.
Thank you.
I have a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Mr. Stone. Okay, we have a motion and a second, and I can now open the floor up for any further discussion.
The only thing I wanted to reference as well that kind of addressed a concern that was brought up over here about the broadness, so to speak, of the zone to B5. I would like to point out, condition of approval number 5 here that essentially is a built-in sunset clause, that Joe has very wisely engineered that, things don't get on. I think Joe and staff recognizes the very specific context and circumstances of the situation, that yes, this would be kind of ideal, so to speak, for this sort of facility. But if things haven't moved on with this particular applicant, that the zone could be rescinded essentially, or a process be made to do so. I think that's especially important to note given the context that it is a family farm, et cetera. It's staying with them, and essentially any other zone change or pursuit of different use on this property would probably necessitate somebody from outside leasing or purchasing. Doesn't seem to me like the family intends to sell off a parcel at all. Again, it's just an extension of their current use. So to address concerns about zoning being broad for maybe some other Meijer or Target or other production facility to swoop in and snatch up.
It would have to
this
come back
opportunity.
before us for any other.
Right, it would have to come before us, and also these folks would also have to be willing to cede their land over for that, and it doesn't seem to be the case.
We have no trouble with that provision at all.
right, and y'all also have no issue with the provision itself. And I would imagine, right, and and I think that's very prudent, and I would imagine that y'all would like to get the ball rolling in a responsible and timely manner.
And it would also have to come before us too if there was any substantial
Changes.
expansion or changes of the operation as we approve it with the PDP, if we approve the PDP that's gonna be heard next.
Mr. Price, you had something else to say?
Okay.
Pardon?
If I may,
You may, as long as you stay on subject. We're not gonna talk about the advantages of farming over having paved roads or whatever. But if you have something to address this specific zone change, and that's all we're talking about right now is a zone change, I'll hear you.
all right. If you grant a zone change in response to this application for a permit, you're going to cause the manufacture of whiskey. That's agreed. I assume that everybody agrees that's what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
The ingredients are going to be hauled in trucks. That's going to add to motor traffic. Customers are going to arrive, as Mr. Dillo just said, not only from Georgetown, he hopes, but also from the interstate. That's motor traffic. If I may call your attention to the Kentucky Driver's Manual, which I had to read to get my driver's license, which I assume everybody here read to get a driver's license. The Kentucky State Police, created by the legislature of Kentucky, regulated by the legislature of Kentucky, advise in their Kentucky Driver's Manual, drive less. Consider walking.
Okay.
But if you grant this permit, you're not only creating another motor destination, you're also creating another motor destination for people who drink alcohol. And the news graphic, fortunately we have a news graphic that keeps people informed about what's going on in Georgetown-Scott County. News graphic a couple of months ago had a picture of current Sheriff Tony Hampton when he was a deputy sheriff, Tony Hampton. He's down there at the sheriff's office with Sheriff Bobby Hammonds handing him an award. The award is because Deputy Tony Hampton arrested, I don't know if he arrested him, let's say he cited more intoxicated motor drivers than any other deputy.
Okay.
He got an award for it.
That's fine.
So
that
public
has nothing
services
to
work.
do with our zone change. You have a problem, Steve, of getting off the subject and going down another road. No, we're talking about a zone change. We're not talking about drunk drivers. We're not talking about awards.
We are talking about drunk drivers.
No, we're not. We're talking about a zone change.
If you grant this permit, you are creating the probability, increase the probability of drunks driving on the road. He just said they're going to arrive by car and they're going to leave by car.
Okay.
And the chances are when they leave, they're going to will have consumed alcohol. Can you deny that?
Yeah, I can.
How
Because
can you deny?
Because I don't drink alcohol at all.
Good for you.
And I can take a carload of people out there, and I'm the designated driver. You know, it's no big deal. Okay, we're going to move on here.
Well, Charlie, the problem is not everybody is as conscientious as you, and pedestrians like me are the probable victims of drunk drivers. And if you allow this man to make whiskey, and I get run over, then you will have contributed to my death. And that's why I'm here to defend my rights as a pedestrian to walk the streets safely with no alcohol flowing. And if you let this land go
that's going to be an unrealistic
production. You deny the option to extend horticulture to the population.
No, we're extending. He's already said we're extending agriculture. He's buying wheat and corn. He's going to make
But that's
cattle
all from a
feed.
big capitalized market.
It
And the
doesn't make any
middleman
difference, it's agriculture.
It is, yeah, it is.
We're gonna, all right,
agriculture, but
we're
it's
through.
not the hor- it's
Steve,
not the
we're through
horticulture.
talking about it.
It's not the horticulture that you are
Steve,
supposed.
we're through talking about it.
You're through with it. I'm not through talking about it.
That's
I'm talking
fine.
about it now.
You can go talk to the news graphic and tell them all you want to.
So my understanding is worried about people getting tickets.
Yes.
Fred, just wanted to make sure.
All right, I'm gonna take a roll call vote for the zone
Remember to
change.
tell that one to Alan Wallace tomorrow.
Uh,
That's a good one.
Zone change, a request from A1 to B5. Mr. Jesse,
Yes.
Ms. Singer,
Yes.
Mr. Shirley,
Yes.
Mr. Vest,
Yes.
Mr. Stone,
Yes.
Mr. Garrett,
Yes.
Mr. Green, Mr. Smith,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. All right. At this time, I'm going to close the public hearing. And we have one other item on the agenda for tonight, and that is PDP 2023-57, the preliminary development plan for 16,000 square foot distillery with a 6,400 square foot tasting room and with accessory tank, silos, and exterior improvements to the 30 acres that we've been talking about at the corner of Paynes Depot and McClellan Circle. Mr. Kane.
Okay. This is the preliminary development plan, and again, this is contingent upon the zone change being approved by City Council and annexation occurring on this property. So this is a request to rezone the 30 acres from A1 to B5. Again, you know where the property is. The uses we've already talked about, kind of a production distillery, tasting room, and tourism-related uses. The main entry and public area is to the south of the tasting room. And there's multiple requirements in our zoning ordinance for any new commercial development. One is landscaping. So we require perimeter landscaping between a B5 zone and an A1 zone or residential zone. We also require VUA, what we call VUA, or parking lot landscaping interior to the parking lot. We have a 10% of the parking lot area is required in interior islands. Then we require landscaping around the parking lot or VUA areas. And then we require canopy coverage for landscaping. In addition, we have parking standards, we have building coverage standards, we have setbacks. This development meets all our B5 requirements, except with an exception of the some of the landscaping requirements. So there are two variances requested. One is our interior landscape island requirement. We require 10% of any parking lot to be in landscaped islands with one tree per 250 square foot of landscape area, but we limit the size of the interior landscape islands, and that's to get a distribution of landscaping throughout the parking lot, so it's not all in one area. We max the maximum area that can be counted in an interior landscape island is 1,500 square feet. The design of this parking lot, since it's a rural area, there's a large area of parking. The interior islands are much larger than 1,500 square feet, so they can meet our 10% requirement. But if you cap each interior island at 1,500 square feet, they can't meet it. You can see the two large interior landscape areas on this plan. So they're asking for a variance to allow to count all the islands towards their interior. The other variance is to the canopy coverage. So any new commercial site, we require 24% canopy coverage at maturity. Because this is all pasture land, and if you count the 30 acres, That's a huge area of canopy coverage. So they're asking for a variance to count only to the disturbed area. So they're disturbing only 17.2 acres of the 30-acre site. If you calculate the canopy on that area, they can meet it with existing landscaping shown. And we're in support of both of those just because of the current, location of the development, the type of development it is. We think it'd be more appropriate just to leave it pasture land in the undeveloped areas, and some of it is kind of low-lying areas, so we think it's appropriate just to landscape the areas around where the development is occurring. There is going to be a buffer between the distillery, an area between the distillery buildings and the adjoining residential lots, the large agricultural lots. There will be a line of landscaping supplementing the existing tree line. The remainder adjoins the existing farm that the owner of the farm that's leasing this 30 acres owns the rest of the farm. They can waive that landscaping requirement. So if it's not waived, there will be a buffer required around the 30 acres as well, in addition to what's there. There is, in the B5, there is a 100-foot perimeter setback. The existing barn on the property and the existing house are within the 100-foot setback. If they were to use that as part of the business, either of those two structures, they would need a variance to the 100-foot. My understanding is they're going to demolish both those structures and not use them as part of this distillery operation. Initially, I had that variance in there as well, but they're not going to need that since these buildings will be taken down. I think I went through all the uses on site. This is a use permitted in the B5 district. They do meet all our other requirements and our setbacks. So we are recommending approval of the preliminary development plan with the conditions in the staff report. I guess I didn't cover the road access. They are using an existing access onto Paynes Depot, but the frontage road, which is in state right-of-way, they will have to widen to commercial standards. I measured it at 20 feet. They'll have to bring that at least 24 foot in width and get a permit from the state since that's in state right-of-way. So they'll have to get an encroachment permit, and the applicant is responsible for all those improvements to bring that up to commercial road standards. Meet our setbacks. Parking, I discussed, the standard is 1 space per 150 square foot in the tasting room, 1 space for 2 employees, plus 1 space per truck used in the business. They do meet all those requirements. They meet our landscaping other than the 2 variances requested. So we are recommending approval with the 2 variances and the 12 conditions of approval. I would say the main conditions are that they do the road improvements. They are responsible for any utility upgrades, any water and sewer upgrades to serve the site. So they are responsible. They will be responsible for all those utility and roadway improvements on site and off site. I included a condition for a photometric plan, and that's just a lighting plan on the final development plan showing that all lighting will be on site, won't have any off-site impacts.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
One of the things that came up in our workshop meeting, and I know we mentioned it here, but because of things that's happened in the past with some other developments, they are going to tear down the barn that you were talking about?
Yeah.
Should that be listed as one of the conditions of approval?
It could be. It could be. I mean, if it's not listed and they don't tear down the barn, they'll have to come back for a variance. But yeah, I mean, it'd be safe to list it in there.
I would like to include that.
Okay.
Just because of the history of what's happened in Scott County in the past with other developments.
And then, Joe, with the road improvements, does that essentially amount to 4 extra feet of shoulder on the adjoining road frontage? Is that really all it amounts to?
Yeah, there'll be other to bring it up to, because at the entrance, it drops pretty quickly. I mean, they'll just have to meet all our commercial road standards.
I see. Entrance and stuff as well? Okay. Got it.
Yeah, we'll have to review it when we get to that stage.
On the sidewalks, then it talks about sidewalks from the parking lot, and then it says a walking path. Is that walking path paved, or is it a path?
I don't know yet, to answer your question, George.
Okay.
I'm sure it's gonna be flat gravel, paved, or paved road.
Okay.
Joe, I've got a question, maybe you or Mr. Dillo can answer. But I know you said you're not gonna have food, just a tasting room. Let's just say 3 or 4 years down the road, things start really getting good. Is there something that he needs to increase, because he's gonna have the fattest cows in the land, right? And, so is there something we need to put in there that says that maybe a restaurant in the future? Because, you know, you're having a drink, maybe you want a steak or something else to eat there, and it's gonna bring some more revenue in also. Or would he have to come back?
If he expanded the footprint, he would have to come back, but the B5 allows a restaurant. I just assumed there would be a restaurant or some food service in there. So it's permitted in B5. The parking standard we used was for a restaurant. I mean, that's 1 to 150 is for our most intensive commercial. So if he put the restaurant within the existing footprint, he wouldn't have to come back. But if he were to expand in the future, add another building or expand the footprint of that building, he would have to come back.
Thank you.
Excuse me, the barn that's to be removed, the only barn I see on here says it's to remain. Is it the barn that's north of where the silos are gonna be?
Yeah, they changed.
This one says to remain.
Yeah, it says on there to remain, because that's what we were looking at once before. That barn is in rough condition, so it's coming down anyway.
Okay, so if I put that in the conditions, it would be the one that's basically immediately north of the silo.
North of the
proposed
silo,
silo.
correct. Yeah, north of the silo.
locations.
If I
Okay.
could ask, if you would consider adding into that recommendation, Harold, I understand why you're asking that. We would like to leave the barn during construction phase of that, because the barn and the house is what will serve for equipment. Some of those different things there, that's where we were gonna store some things.
No, that, in my opinion, that's not a problem. I just want to make sure that, because we just want to be consistent
Yeah.
on these things.
We're gonna, as soon as construction's over with and we don't need the use of the storage or out of the weather, it's coming down.
So what does that change in terms of variance 3? Because that was a reduction in the perimeter setback specifically to support the barn? Is that correct?
Yeah, well, if it just remains as a barn and used as a barn, it's grandfathered. The zone change won't affect it, but if it's part of the business, it would need I wanted to make sure that the variance was granted for using the barn as part of the business, but it sounds like they're not going to. And if they're gonna demolish the barn after construction,
Then we
we
should
don't
take
need
out 3.
variance 3, or
Yeah.
we could reword it to say, well, we don't need the variance, but we can add a condition that says the barn to be removed after construction.
Okay. But number 3 can go away?
Yeah.
Number 3 is what goes away?
Number 3 on the variances.
Variances.
Which was a reduction in the setback to support the barn.
I already took it out.
I was gonna say, I don't
of
have
the
3.
conditions that I wrote up for tonight, but it's
Stop
in the
confusing me,
staff-
please.
Now, Charlie, that's a tough task.
Yeah, well, it is, isn't it? I take it back.
You can quote me on that, too.
All right. Thank you, Joe.
So the only thing I was gonna say is that our client is in favor of all the conditions of approval, including the condition that it would be torn down, the barn would be torn down after construction, and the 2 waivers. So So he's in agreement with those.
And you said that the building itself is going to be built like a farmhouse style?
It's gonna be more in that farmhouse style, the wraparound porch. The distillery building itself, not much I can do with that. We will have landscaping around it to make it look nice.
Right.
If you think about Four Roses, something like Four Roses, it'll be in that mindset.
Okay.
So it'll be more like that.
But just to clarify, the barn is already falling in, correct?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
it's not in good
I'm
shape.
not proposing to tear down a, just want to make sure people know that.
All right. Any other questions of anyone?
Public discussion?
Yes, sir.
Now,
Go right ahead.
try to say briefly what I said before in reference to the tasting room. Kentucky, Scott County specifically, has been targeted for vice. If you look up the word vice in the dictionary, I looked it up today, vice. A vice, let's see what it says here quickly. Vice, an evil or wicked action, habit, or characteristic. And the word vicious you'll find on the same page, vicious. And I'm saying to you that the production and marketing of whiskey is vicious commerce compared to virtuous commerce that this represents, and that, let's say, apple trees and apple cider, non-alcoholic cider in everybody's backyard represents. There is a virtuous agriculture. And you, if you already granted the permit, and if you grant the tasting room, you're embellishing a vicious commerce in toxic whiskey.
Mr. Price, I think it's in bad taste to slander these people.
I'm sorry?
I think it's in poor taste to slander these people and their intentions. That's essentially what you're doing right now. We're not here to
Is that
pass
who's
judgment
talking
on
behind
people's
your hands?
morals.
Who's
Sir,
talking?
That's me.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I
Yeah.
couldn't see. Now, say that again,
I
please.
think it's in poor taste to come in here and slander these people's
Well, then what,
intentions or pass
how
their
did you
judgment.
get appointed to the board of, to the Planning and Zoning Commission? What kind of good taste did you exhibit to get to sit in that chair?
Steve, I don't know that that's we
Huh?
don't even.
Say what?
I don't know if that has anything to do with anything we're talking about.
I think we're wildly out of order,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
You know, whether he has a tasting room or not, doesn't do away with the liquor stores in town.
No, but it decreases the volume of poison in the streets.
Okay.
You want to
You
increase
may-
the volume or you want to decrease the volume? And here's the problem, here's the thing, Charlotte. For every person you deflect from alcohol consumption, you create the option for that person to be productive as opposed to consumptive.
Okay.
And when that comes to children and young people, that's very important. That's you set the good example if you encourage this Mr. Dillo to raise crops, horticulture crops, which anybody can raise on his land.
We're not going through that again. I've already told you.
Okay, well, when you set up the tasting room, you say to the mommies and daddies, let's climb in the car, let's go get drunk, and then drive home. Maybe we'll make it, maybe we won't.
No, nobody said anything about getting drunk.
What's that?
Okay, next.
No one gets drunk on 2 ounces of tasting.
I couldn't hear you, I'm sorry.
No one medically can get
You
drunk on
need to
2
get your
ounces of
hearing
a
aid,
tasting.
Steve, if you're to come in here.
No one can get drunk tasting 2 ounces of liquor.
Nobody can get drunk in the tasting room, is that what you said?
Not on what's required by the state of Kentucky. You can only consume, I think it's 2 ounces.
Okay.
Well,
We've got other people that need.
What I'm gonna say is we have a history of vices, government-sponsored, government-subsidized vices in Scott County. Tobacco, whiskey, racehorsing, gambling that is, and now cars. Toyota was just ordered to pay $60 million, Toyota Finance Corporation, to order to pay
Steve?
$60 million.
That's it.
Sit down.
That's it. No, you have stepped over the line.
Grant the permit.
Sit down and be quiet, or I'll call the law to come in here. We're not gonna put up with this, ma'am.
we were just talking about concerns about a restaurant, and we believe that we could add, if you all are willing, to add a condition on approval, just that if they ever want to do a full-service restaurant, that they would come back and ask for that condition to be removed. So I think the plan is like hors d'oeuvres and small, things to soak up some of that whiskey, but, not any kind of full-service restaurant at this point, at least. We would have to come back
Okay.
for approval of that.
We just need to make sure we understand the definition of full service, right, that everybody agrees on what that definition is.
Like a sit-down restaurant. I don't know if there's any
With a
kind of
menu and,
thing that you all can help
Pub
add to
food.
that.
There is an FDA requirement for
Okay.
food service, so
Okay.
food service requires anything out of the package, so we don't have to wear gloves, things of that nature. But what we're looking to do is cheese, crackers, things of that nature, just to have something.
Nothing cooked.
Nothing cooked,
Yeah.
right. I mean, we're not coming in. Now, I will say if we ever have an event where we want food there, we'll have to cater it in. We're not doing anything of that nature. Okay, so we will bring catered food in from time to time, but we would agree.
So the restaurant condition would exclude any
Yes,
catered events?
correct.
I think
Yeah.
that makes sense, and it would just be not, an on-site, full-service staff restaurant
And
in
we
this
would agree with
conjunction. Okay. All right, thank you, and that was it.
Thanks.
thank you. And thank you all for working that out. Appreciate it.
So let me make sure I understand. So an additional condition would be that if the applicant wishes at any time in the future to add a fully staffed cooking and all that on-site restaurant, you'd come back to have modification of the development plan,
Yes, that's
regardless of whether the basic footprint changes.
Correct.
With the exception of catered events?
Well, that's not on-site.
I will
No,
say there is-
Yeah.
they would be catering it.
Well,
to the
yeah,
site.
but-
They
but
wouldn't be
no, I'm talking about
catering
production
food
on site.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was gonna say, we were just talking to, just to make clear, we do have a break room with a stove, so we need to make sure we're allowing.
Well, unplug that sucker right now.
I know how this can go, so.
All right, yes, ma'am, I'm ready. to-
Okay, I'll make a motion for approval of PDP 2023-57, eliminating it on our version of the staff report, variance 3 regarding the reduction of the perimeter setback, addition of a condition of approval 13, removal of the existing barn following the construction phase, and condition 14, that regardless of whether or not the footprint was expanded, they would be required to come back if they wanted to have a full-service operation restaurant that would not exclude them from having catered events on site.
You know, I gotta write down all this stuff. You understand that, don't you?
I'm trying to confuse you again, Charlie.
But be sure the tape
Here,
gets all
you want
this.
my notes?
There, Mary's got it, Charlie.
Hey, here.
Yeah, break it
Just take
down,
my
I'll
notes.
staple it
Okay.
together.
Okay.
All
I
right.
think it's clear enough on my notes, but you decide.
I have a motion.
Second?
Dan, was that you?
Yeah.
All right, Dan Smith,
Yes.
Brad Green, Ron Garrett,
Yes.
James Stone,
Yes.
David Vest,
Yes.
Dean Jesse,
Yes.
Brett Shirley,
Yes.
Mary Singer,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. We got about halfway through and realized I've been doing everybody Mr. and Ms. all night and then went by first name, so. that's about it. All right. We have to, an administrative duty, we have to approve the dates for application deadlines and workshops and meetings for 2024. You should, you had that in your packet. It was the very last page. I hope you have looked it over.
There are no changes in the times, the workshop, same time.
Okay.
Commission, same time, 6 o'clock, second Thursday. There's just one day, it's a holiday, the workshop in November,
So it's on
Monday
Tuesday.
falls
Tuesday.
on Veterans Day, so it's gonna be Tuesday instead of Monday in November.
So by coming from the staff, do we need a recommendation or, yeah,
Yeah.
you still do?
I recommend we approve this schedule.
All right. Made by Mr. Smith.
So that's, I'm sorry, Joe, which date is changed to Tuesday?
Yeah,
The November meeting?
No.
No, the workshop.
The workshop, got it,
Instead of Monday.
got it.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Do I hear,
Motion to adjourn.
adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Yeah, well, I'm still writing this stuff. That's not fair.
You can stay here.
Do you need
All
this
night
back
long,
to the record, or
Charlie.
has it already been entered elsewhere?
They'll leave the lights on for you,
Thanks a lot.
and I'll let you keep them in. Thank you. Always fun.
Darren?